The crosshairs of a Macmillan TAC 338 don't care about your gender, and a 250-grain bullet doesn't ask for permission. When the top brass in Washington wrote off the op as a suicide mission, they didn't factor in a sniper named Night Fox. This is how she proved them dead wrong. The air in the secure briefing room at Naval Air Station Oceana, Dam Neck Annex, was cold enough to preserve meat. It was a stark contrast to the heat radiating from the satellite imagery projected onto the main screen. The target was a jagged, unforgiving stretch of the Puntland coast in Somalia. Nestled into the cliffside was a heavily fortified compound that officially didn't exist, run by a man who officially was already dead. Lieutenant Commander Catherine Caldwell sat near the back of the room, her posture rigid, her eyes locked on the thermal scans. At 32, she was the first female Tier 1 sniper to operate within the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, DevGRU. She had survived Bud-S, endured the grueling sniper school, and had outshot operators with a decade more experience. Yet, in rooms like this, inhabited by men with stars on their collars, she was still an anomaly. At the head of the table stood Vice Admiral Thomas Croft, a man whose combat experience dated back to the First Gulf War. Croft was old-school Navy, brilliant, ruthless, and entirely skeptical of modern personnel integrations. He tapped a laser pointer against the projected image of the compound. "Gentlemen," Croft began, his voice a low gravel, pointedly ignoring Caldwell's presence. "Our target is Viktor Volkov, ex-Spetsnaz, currently running a rogue private military syndicate that just acquired 3 stolen MQ-9 Reaper drones and the command and control uplink to arm them. In 48 hours, Volkov is auctioning that tech to the highest bidder in the Horn of Africa." Croft swiped to the next slide, revealing the fortress. "It's impenetrable by conventional assault. Anti-air batteries cover the airspace. A frontal amphibious assault would be a bloodbath. The only way in is to sever the head of the snake before the body knows what's happening. We need a synchronized strike. An assault team breaches the lower perimeter, while a sniper team neutralizes Volkov and destroys the primary communications dish simultaneously." Captain David Mitchell, the DevGRU commanding officer, leaned forward. "Admiral, I'm assigning Team Trident for the breach. For the overwatch, I'm sending Chief Gallagher and Lieutenant Commander Caldwell. Call sign, Night Fox." The briefing room fell dead silent. Admiral Croft slowly lowered his laser pointer and turned to look directly at Caldwell. A condescending smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Night Fox?" Croft repeated, the skepticism dripping from every syllable. "What is this, a Marvel comic? Sounds like a call sign cooked up by a Hollywood publicist to sell a diversity initiative, Captain. This isn't a PR stunt. Volkov has counter-sniper teams equipped with Russian-made thermal optics. The hide requires a 1,200-yard shot at a 30-degree downward angle over open ocean crosswinds. We need a shooter, not a mascot. Beside Caldwell, Chief Petty Officer Brodie Gallagher, a giant of a man and her long-time spotter, tensed, his jaw tightening. Caldwell put a subtle, calming hand on his forearm under the table. She didn't blink. She didn't scowl. She met the Admiral's gaze with the cold, detached stare of a predator assessing a minor obstacle. "With respect, Admiral," Caldwell said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. "The wind off the Puntland coast averages 15 knots, gusting to 20. The 30-degree declination shifts the bullet's point of impact up by precisely 2.4 milliradians at that distance. I accounted for this in my preliminary ballistic charts before you even walked into the room. You don't have to like my call sign, sir. You just have to like my hit rate, which is currently 100%. A few operators in the room shifted uncomfortably, stifling grins. Croft's eyes narrowed. He hated being corrected, especially by a junior officer, and especially in front of his men. "Fine, Night Fox," Croft sneered. "But if you miss, or if you compromise this team, the blood of every man on Team Trident is on your hands, and I will personally see to it that your career ends in a basement pushing papers." "Understood, Admiral," Caldwell replied evenly. "I don't miss." The die was cast. The mission, Operation Silent Tide, was green-lit. But as Caldwell and Gallagher packed their gear bags that night, checking their Kestrel wind meters and meticulously cleaning the bolt of the Macmillan TAC 338, they both knew the stakes had just doubled. It wasn't just about stopping a global threat anymore. It was about proving that the era of underestimating Catherine Caldwell was over. The insertion was a masterclass in calculated misery. 48 hours later, the USS Florida, a nuclear-powered guided missile submarine, hovered silently just off the Somali continental shelf. From its dry deck shelter, Caldwell, Gallagher, and the six-man assault team deployed into the pitch-black, frigid waters of the Indian Ocean aboard Stealth Seal Delivery Vehicles, SDVs. Breathing pure oxygen through their closed-circuit Draeger rebreathers, they swam the final nautical mile. There were no bubbles, no sound, just the rhythmic, burning exertion of moving through the dark. Caldwell carried over 80 pounds of gear, including her primary weapon broken down in a watertight drag bag. They breached the surface at 0200 local time. The jagged cliffs of Puntland loomed above them, like the jagged teeth of a leviathan. Leaving the assault team at the base of the ravine, Caldwell and Gallagher began the grueling, vertical ascent. Using tactical grapnels and suppressed ascenders, they scaled 150 feet of sheer, crumbling rock, every dislodged pebble sounding like a gunshot over the crashing waves below. By 0345, they had established their hide on an outcropping that offered a commanding view of Volkov's fortress. Gallagher expertly laid out the camouflage netting, blending their silhouette into the rocky background using ATAC's arid camo. Caldwell assembled her rifle by touch, muscle memory guiding the bolt into the chassis, sliding the heavy barrel into place. She pressed her eye to the Schmidt and Bender scope. Through the night vision optic, Volkov's compound glowed in eerie shades of green and white. "I have the dish," Caldwell whispered, centering her crosshairs on the massive microwave communications relay on the roof of the main building. "Distance?" "Ranging," Gallagher muttered, looking through his spotting scope. 1,240 yards. Wind is brutal, Cat. Full value from the left, 17 knots, gusting 22. Humidity is 80%. Barometric pressure is dropping. "Dialing 6.8 mils up, holding 2.2 left," Caldwell said, her breathing slowing to a rhythmic, meditative pace. Her heart rate dropped to 60 beats per minute. "Trident is moving to breach point Alpha," Gallagher relayed, listening to the encrypted comms chatter in his earpiece. 3 minutes to sink." Caldwell scanned the compound. Something felt wrong. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. An instinct honed by years of reading anomalies in the battlefield. She shifted her optic from the dish to the courtyard below. "Brody, check the patrol paths," she whispered. Gallagher swung his glass down. Silence hung between them for an agonizing 5 seconds. "Damn it," Gallagher hissed. "They aren't patrolling. They're establishing a funnel." Through her scope, Caldwell saw it. The guards weren't walking standard perimeter beats. They were purposefully leaving a blind spot near the western wall, the exact spot Team Trident was currently approaching to breach. Worse, tucked into the shadows of a second-story balcony overlooking that blind spot, Caldwell spotted the faint, unnatural geometric shape of a heavy barrel. "Heavy machine gun nest, DSK, 12.7 millimeters, concealed on the second-floor terrace, Caldwell said, her blood running cold. Thermal sweeping optics mounted. They aren't guarding the perimeter. They're waiting for an ambush. Intel had been disastrously wrong. Volkov knew they were coming. Someone had tipped him off, and Team Trident was 60 seconds away from walking right into a meat grinder. "Command, this is Night Fox," Gallagher whispered urgently into the PRC-117G radio. "Abort breach. I say again, abort breach. Target area is a compromised kill zone." Static hissed back. "Night Fox, this is Overlord. Negative. Signal is being jammed locally at the perimeter. Trident cannot hear you." Admiral Croft's voice suddenly cut through the static from the command center halfway across the world. "Night Fox, what is your status? Why are you calling an abort?" "Admiral, Volkov has a trap set. A heavy machine gun is zeroed on Trident's breach point. Comms to Trident are jammed. If they breach, they die." "Take out the gunner," Croft ordered. "Negative," Caldwell interjected. "If I fire on the gunner, I compromise my position. Volkov will hear the shot, take cover, and trigger the drone launch sequence before we can hit the dish. The mission fails." "If you don't take that gunner, my men die, Caldwell," Croft shouted, his earlier smugness replaced by panic. "Shoot the damn gunner." Caldwell stared through the scope. The HMG gunner's finger was hovering over the spade grips. Below, she saw the IR strobes of Team Trident stacking up against the western wall, oblivious to the fact that they were seconds away from being shredded. She had to take out the communications dish to complete the mission, take out Volkov to cut the head off the snake, and take out the gunner to save the team. And she only had one bullet in the chamber. "Brody," Caldwell said, her voice dropping an octave, slipping into a terrifying calm. "Give me a read on the structural support of the comms dish, the left stanchion." Gallagher looked at her, his eyes widening. "Cat, you can't be serious. The math on a ricochet at this distance." "Give me the read, Chief," she snapped. Gallagher locked his scope onto the metal support beam, holding up the massive satellite dish. Solid steel, angled at 45 degrees downward, directly towards the second-story balcony. "Wind hold for the stanchion. Cat, if you miss the angle by a millimeter, the bullet deflects harmlessly. Trident gets wiped out, and Volkov escapes." "I told the Admiral I don't miss," Caldwell whispered, chambering a .338 Lapua Magnum armor-piercing round. "Wind hold, Brody." "Hold 2.4 left," Gallagher said, his voice trembling slightly. "Elevation 7.1. Send it when ready." Caldwell exhaled, emptying her lungs. The world tunneled. The sound of the ocean faded. The only thing that existed was the reticle, the wind, and the math. She squeezed the trigger. The recoil of the Macmillan Take 338 punched into Caldwell's shoulder, a familiar, violent thud that she absorbed perfectly, keeping her eye glued to the optic to track the trace of the bullet. For 2.1 seconds, the 250-grain Lapua Magnum armor-piercing round tore through the humid coastal air, ripping a supersonic vacuum in its wake. At 1,240 yards, the Earth's rotation, the barometric pressure, the spin drift, and the vicious crosswind all conspired to push the bullet off course. But Caldwell had done the math. She had measured the world and found it wanting. Through the Schmidt and Bender scope, the world seemed to freeze. The heavy bullet slammed into the primary steel stanchion supporting the massive satellite dish. The kinetic energy transfer was catastrophic. Sparks showered the roof like a dying firework. The armor-piercing core bit into the angled steel, shearing the structural bolt in half. The stanchion buckled instantly, but the bullet wasn't done. Deflecting at a precise downward 45-degree angle, the deformed slug maintained enough terminal velocity to act as a deadly shrapnel wave. It tore through the second-story balcony awning and struck the breech of the DSHK heavy machine gun, violently detonating the ammunition belt feeding into it. A secondary explosion rocked the terrace. The gunner was thrown backward, incapacitated, the ambush dismantled in a single heartbeat. Simultaneously, the severed stanchion gave way. The massive communications dish groaned, tilted, and crashed through the roof of the main building in a shower of concrete and twisted metal. Target neutralized. Comm dish destroyed. Jamming signal is down, Caldwell reported, her voice as flat as a heart monitor on a corpse. She cycled the bolt, the smoking brass casing ejecting into the dirt. She immediately chambered a fresh round. On the command network, the static cleared. Chief Bones Harrison, leading Team Trident at the base of the wall, came over the net, breathing hard. "Overlord, this is Trident. We just had a secondary explosion above us, and the jammer dropped. Breach is a go." In the command center, thousands of miles away, dead silence hung over the communications operators. Admiral Croft stared at the live feed from the overhead drone, his mouth slightly open. He had just witnessed a geometrical impossibility executed under the most stressful combat conditions imaginable. "Trident, this is Overlord," Captain Mitchell said, stepping up to the microphone, shooting a sideways glance at the stunned Admiral. "Breach and clear. Night Fox has the overwatch." Below, the assault team blew the western wall. The breaching charge sent a shockwave up the cliffside. Trident poured into the courtyard, moving with the fluid, lethal grace of Tier 1 operators. Suppressed M4s coughed quietly as they methodically cleared the perimeter guards, securing the courtyard in less than 60 seconds. "First floor clear," Harrison reported. "Moving to the second." Caldwell scanned the windows ahead of them, her crosshairs darting from shadow to shadow. "Brody, keep an eye on the rear exit," she instructed. "I've got nothing," Gallagher said, peering through his spotting scope. "Thermal is clean." 2 minutes passed, agonizing, sweat-drenched minutes. "Overlord, Trident." Harrison's voice cracked over the radio. There was a tight, panicked edge to it that Caldwell had never heard from the veteran chief before. "Building is secure. We have the drone command consoles. They're empty. Just dummy terminals. Volkov isn't here." Croft snatched the microphone. "What do you mean he isn't there? The intel confirmed he was in the command center." "The command center is a decoy, Admiral," Harrison shouted over the comms. "We found a sub-basement tunnel leading out towards the cliffs. And Overlord, the launch sequence for the Reapers just activated on the dummy screens. He's controlling them remotely." Caldwell's heart hammered against her ribs. She panned her rifle away from the compound, tracking down the coastline, following the jagged rocks where the subterranean tunnel must empty out. "Brody," Caldwell snapped. "Find him. Now." The adrenaline that had spiked during the destruction of the comms dish now crystallized into something entirely different inside Lieutenant Commander Catherine Caldwell. It became a cold, hyper-focused dread. The radio chatter in her earpiece was a chaotic symphony of controlled panic. Chief Harrison's voice, usually a bedrock of calm, was strained as his men tore through the empty decoy command center. "Scanning the shoreline," Chief Petty Officer Brody Gallagher said, his voice tight, his eye practically glued to the spotting scope. He was panning the heavy optics across the pitch-black, violently crashing waves at the base of the cliffs. "Nothing. Just rocks and foam. Wait, hold on." He adjusted the focus, dialing up the thermal gain. "Heat bloom," Gallagher announced, his tone dropping an octave. 2 clicks north, hidden in a tidal inlet. Caldwell didn't waste a millimeter of movement. She wrenched the heavy Macmillan Take 338 on its bipod, grinding the spiked feet into the loose shale of their hide. She tracked north, chasing the coordinates Gallagher threw at her. "Distance?" she demanded. "Lacing now." Gallagher replied, tapping the button on his laser rangefinder. The invisible beam bounced off the target and returned the data. 1,650 yards. Cat, that's almost a full mile. Through her Schmidt and Bender optic, Caldwell finally found the cave. Even enhanced by Generation 3 night vision, it was little more than a deeper shade of black against the dark ocean. But deep inside that jagged maw, a distinct thermal signature pulsed. It was a ghost boat, a radar-absorbent, low-profile stealth insertion craft, tucked neatly into the sea cave. The twin outboard engines were already running hot, glowing a bright, angry white in her thermal display. And there, standing near the helm, was the distinct, broad-shouldered silhouette of Viktor Volkov. In front of him, the faint, rectangular glow of a ruggedized military laptop illuminated his face. He was frantically typing, a mobile satellite uplink dish deployed on the stern of the small craft. "Overlord Nightfox," Caldwell transmitted, her voice chillingly level. "I have visual on HVT. He's aboard a stealth egress craft preparing to launch. He has a mobile uplink." Thousands of miles away, in the TOC at Dam Neck, Admiral Thomas Croft stared at the main screen. The drone feed was struggling to penetrate the cloud cover, but the audio from Caldwell's transmission cut through the room like a knife. "He's initiating the final arming sequence for the Reapers," Croft barked into the mic, his previous disdain entirely replaced by sheer desperation. "Cyber Command says the handshake protocol is 90% complete. If he hits the final keystroke, those drones take off autonomously and drop their payload on the capital. Caldwell, you have less than 60 seconds to drop that son of a bitch." "Copy," Caldwell said. 1,650, Gallagher calculated frantically, the illuminated screen of his Kestrel wind meter displaying a terrifying set of variables. "Bullet drop is catastrophic at this range, Cat. You're looking at a 14.2 mil elevation adjustment. The bullet is going to drop over 40 feet. Time of flight is roughly 2.8 seconds. "Wind?" Caldwell asked, her fingers already clicking the elevation turret on her scope. "It's howling out of the north now," Gallagher said, swallowing hard. 25 knots, gusting to 30. It's a crosswind nightmare. "Hold? Hold 4.1 left," Gallagher read off. "But Cat, the boat is bobbing in the tide. It's a moving target, at a mile, in a gale. It's too much." Before Caldwell could even process the hold adjustment, the world shattered. Crack thwap. A blinding flash erupted from the cliffs directly above the sea cave, accompanied instantly by the terrifying, supersonic snap of a bullet, breaking the sound barrier inches from Caldwell's skull. A 7.62 millimeter armor-piercing round smashed into the rock face right beside her ear, detonating the shale and spraying razor-sharp stone shrapnel across her right cheek. Caldwell didn't flinch away from the scope, though a thick, warm line of blood immediately welled up and tracked down her jawline, soaking into the collar of her combat shirt. "Counter-sniper!" Gallagher yelled, his training taking over as he instinctively dropped flat against the deck. "Spetsnaz Overwatch! He's dug into the ridge above the cave. He saw your muzzle flash from the dish shot. He's zeroing us." "Ignore him," Caldwell said, her eye never leaving the reticle. "Cat, he just bracketed you. The next one is going through your optic and into your brain." "I said ignore him," Caldwell barked, her voice cutting through the wind, the crashing waves, and the panic with absolute, unyielding authority. "If I shift fire to the sniper, Volkov hits enter, the drones launch, and he disappears into the Indian Ocean. The mission is Volkov. Read the wind, Brody." In the command center, Admiral Croft listened to the audio feed, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the console. The room was dead silent. He was listening to a commander actively, consciously choose to take incoming, highly accurate sniper fire just to buy the 2 seconds needed to complete the objective. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had grossly underestimated the woman behind the rifle. Crack thwap. A second round tore through the ATAC's camouflage netting directly above them, snapping a carbon fiber support pole in half. The Spetsnaz shooter had adjusted for wind. He was dialed in. "Wind is shifting. 28 knots!" Gallagher yelled, abandoning his own safety to look back through the spotting scope. "Hold 4.5 left. Elevation 14.2. Cat, he's closing the laptop. He's reaching for the final execute command." Caldwell slowed her breathing. The incoming fire didn't matter. The blood dripping off her chin didn't matter. Admiral Croft, the brass in Washington, the impossible math, none of it mattered. The world tunneled down to a circle of glass. She watched the rhythmic rise and fall of the stealth boat on the ocean swells. The tide was pushing it up against the cave wall, then dropping it into the trough. 1, 2, 3. She timed the rhythm of the ocean. She calculated the apex of the wave. She aimed not at where Viktor Volkov was standing, but where his chest would be in exactly 2.8 seconds, factoring in a drop of over 40 feet, pushed horizontally by a 28-knot gale. She placed the center of her crosshairs in empty, black space, trusting the physics, trusting her spotter, trusting herself. "Sending," Caldwell whispered. She pressed the trigger straight to the rear. The Tarsay 338 roared, a localized thunderclap that kicked dust into the air. The heavy, 250-grain Lapua Magnum round leaped from the barrel, beginning its long, agonizing, arcing journey through the dark sky. Caldwell immediately racked the bolt, ejecting the brass, but she didn't look away from the scope. She followed the trace. 1 second. The bullet fought through the initial crosswind, drifting left. 2 seconds. The Spetsnaz counter-sniper above the cave fired his third shot. The round sparked violently off the rock directly between the bipod legs of Caldwell's rifle, throwing a chip of stone straight into her forehead. She blinked through the dust, keeping her eye open. Almost 3 seconds. Through the scope, a mile away, the glowing screen of the ruggedized laptop abruptly exploded. It vanished in a violent shower of white-hot sparks and shattered lithium batteries. The heavy point 338 round punched clean through the reinforced screen, obliterated the mobile uplink chassis behind it, and maintained enough kinetic energy to strike Viktor Volkov square in the center of mass. The impact lifted the massive Russian off his feet, throwing him violently over the stern of the stealth boat. He hit the black water of the Indian Ocean and did not resurface. "Target down," Caldwell reported, her voice completely even, as if she were reading a grocery list. "Uplink destroyed. HVT is KIA." Beside her, Gallagher let out a long, ragged breath that sounded dangerously close to a sob. He keyed his radio. "Overlord, this is Night Fox. Confirming HVT is down. Mobile command is neutralized. We are taking highly effective counter-sniper fire. Moving to secondary extraction point immediately." In the TOC, the silence held for a beat, then shattered into a chorus of cheers. But Captain Mitchell simply stared at Admiral Croft. Croft slowly took off his headset, rubbing his face with both hands. "Copy that, Night Fox," Mitchell said, stepping to the comms panel, his voice thick with relief and a deep, profound respect. "Cyber confirms drone arming sequence has failed. The Reapers are powering down. Trident is moving to cover your exfil route. Get out of there, Cat. Godspeed." On the cliffside, Caldwell packed her rifle into the watertight drag bag with methodical, practiced precision. She wiped the blood from her cheek and forehead with the back of her tactical glove, leaving a dark smear across her face. She looked at Gallagher, who was still shaking slightly from the near misses. She gave him a tight, single nod. "Let's ghost," she whispered. They grabbed their gear and slid backward, fading into the jagged shadows of the Somali cliffs. The Spetsnaz sniper fired 2 more blind shots into the darkness, but there was nothing left to hit. Caldwell and Gallagher vanished into the night, leaving nothing behind but the shattered remains of a global threat and a legacy that the top brass would never question again. The debrief at Dam Neck was noticeably quieter than the initial briefing. Admiral Croft stood at the head of the table, his eyes locked on Lieutenant Commander Caldwell. He didn't offer an apology, but he didn't need to. He simply slid her after-action report across the mahogany wood, stamped with a single word in bold red ink. Verified. Night Fox had spoken, and the entire chain of command finally listened.